Good morning, everyone. Sorry for being so loud so early in the morning, 11 a.m.
You think of Robin Williams. Good morning, Vietnam. That's what
Ooh,
I was
such a
thinking.
good movie. Uh, yeah, well, welcome back to the Tree Planners podcast. It's another Tuesday morning, and I'm joined as, when she feels like it, Margaret.
I knew that joke was coming. I almost wanted to say, like, hey, I'm here again, like I have
Yeah.
been most of the times.
I'm becoming predictable in my old age.
Yeah.
Um, and we're joined today also by Jennifer Van Gennep.
Hi,
Thanks for joining us, Jennifer.
of course. Thank you for inviting me.
And so, like always, we start off. If you find this podcast interesting, at the end of it, after you've listened to enough of it to make up your mind and you appreciate it, leave us a rating on your podcast platform. That really helps other people find the content. So it's kind of like sharing the love. What's the name? Or what's the saying? Share the something. Anyways.
Leave it on your own there, Adam. We have no idea what you're talking
But if you do that, we'd appreciate it. And, like and subscribe and all that stuff. And you can find more information on us, the Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition, SCGC, on our website at simcoecountygreenbelt.ca. So today we are interested in talking about the emergency that the city of Barrie just declared. Well, not only that, but also sort of the underlying issue. So the city of Barrie just declared an emergency to address the the homeless crisis or the housing crisis. I mean, they're intertwined in the city. And so I guess, we can talk about sort of some of the stuff that's led up. Well, maybe we start with sort of what's happening currently. Jennifer's very involved with this, and then maybe we can talk about what's led up to it. And
about. And let
possibly
people know
some
who
solutions.
Jennifer is. So, Jennifer, now you have to introduce yourself and your credentials.
Sure. We call them credentials? I don't know. So I'm Jennifer. I live here in Barrie. I've been here for 17 years. And I work at Redwood Park Communities, which is an affordable housing charity there. I'm the director of communications and advocacy. And I've been there for a long time, probably 15 years. And then I'm also a member of the Barrie Homelessness and Housing Justice Network, one of the founding members there. And I'm a co-chair of the Ontario Alliance to End Homelessness. So I try to stay nonpartisan, but take a justice lens to housing. It is, after all, a human right. And just try to, in a nonpartisan way, provide some accountability and policy advocacy, I guess you would call it. Yeah, around housing and homelessness in Barrie, but Simcoe County and Ontario and kind of broader. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I have like a bit of a background question here. I know you were a part of the enumeration for the homeless population and the houseless population in Simcoe County. Can you tell us just a little bit before we get into the specifics of the Barrie situation about what that, because I saw the former mayor, Jeff Lehman, posted talking about how that survey helped understand like the reasons people are on the street, how many are on the street, kind of some of the stories of where they've come from, or some of the demographics. So can you share some top notes about what we learned about houselessness in Simcoe County from that?
Sure. That is a onion of a question, but I was
I'm
not
full of
involved.
them. I'm full of them.
Aren't you? So I was not involved in this last enumeration. My involvement with the enumeration was really when I was part of the Simcoe County Alliance to End Homelessness. I was the chair of the Barrie chapter for quite a while. And I was also kind of a lead on communications for them. And SCADA used to be one of the partners for the enumeration. And so I played a role there, especially around the communications part. But I was not involved in this last one. So with that being said, an enumeration and a point in time count is mandated by, I think, both the federal and the provincial governments. Definitely the federal government, and then they fund it as well. So Simcoe County has to count, all participating communities count the number of people who are experiencing homelessness, usually over like a 2-3 day period. Sometimes it's just in one night, like in a 24-hour period, but usually we do it a little bit longer. And it's also, so there's the count, but there's also a survey. So if people are willing, they can complete the survey, and it's honestly pretty invasive. It's the same, at least it used to be, the same survey that we use to triage people who are looking for support when they have experienced homelessness. So it asks you a lot of questions like, were you ever in foster care? Were you abused as a child? And it's looking for all, like, to kind of, so when the mayor says, we know how they got here, that's the kind of history that we ask in these surveys. And I will say, this is probably more than you were looking for, but I will say the way we use the survey in reporting about enumeration, I think does a disservice, honestly, to the people who are experiencing homelessness. It kind of frames it up, like we talk about it being a systems problem. We talk about homelessness being a systems problem, systems problem, systems problem. And then in enumeration, we say, well, how did you last lose your housing? And the options are, I got in a fight with my spouse, I got in a fight with my parents, I couldn't afford my place anymore, I got in a fight with my landlord, those kinds of questions. If you say unbridled capitalism, they just check other. So there's no, if you say the cost of living has become completely detached from the social service benefits that I receive from the government, they just check other. There actually isn't an option for them to gather those kinds of statistics. And then we also ask people about mental health and addictions and their health. And then we don't make any effort to distinguish between correlation and causation. So it certainly feeds into this idea that mental health and addictions are the cause of homelessness, when often, I mean, sometimes they are, but sometimes it's the other way around. Being houseless is really traumatic, and it would not be, I couldn't even say that I, within a couple of weeks of being on the street, wouldn't be looking for some substances to help me stay awake at night to stay safe, and then help me forget my life sometimes. So, yeah, I would say, so that's what an enumeration is. It's we count up folks, and then write up a report, but we're not super careful in our report to make sure that we're framing homelessness as a systems problem and not an individual problem. So we kind of do them a disservice there. But it is useful information. And it gathers information because in Simcoe County, we also have a dashboard. So we can look nightly and we can see how many people were in shelter, those kinds of things. But the dashboard does not count the number of people who saw the lineup outside of the shelter and so didn't bother to get in line, the number of people who stayed in a tent at night. We don't capture any of what's happening outside the system. The dashboard only captures what's happening inside the system. So I think there's value in doing it, because there's been some pushback about why do we still do an enumeration when we have like up-to-date data about the people who are in our system. But we need a way to capture the people who aren't in the system too. That's a long.
No,
we're not off to a good start with keeping it tight.
No. I'm glad that you did that, because it's important to have that critical analysis of it. And looking over the 22 infographic, 2022 Simcoe County enumeration infographic, it's very clear that like front and center is, substance abuse, except that also includes smoking. So like, I don't know if everybody, when you say that X no percent experience substance abuse, whether everybody's already is thinking about smoking, or to your point about mental illness, that number is pretty highlighted, but also it goes back to what came first, the chicken or the egg, right?
Yeah,
There is no nothing about that. So it does start to feel like it almost could play into the othering part of it, depending on how it's used, right? Of like,
absolutely.
it can either help. I think if it was done in one way, it could help eliminate or take apart some of those stereotypes, and in other ways, it could reinforce them.
Exactly. Yeah, that is my critique of enumeration, having been part of it, and now the other part of it is how many times, because I think we're on our fourth or fifth one. We started in 2018. So every time the methodology changes a little bit. So they tell you every year you can't compare it to the year before to the previous ones. And how many times can you count the same people without housing them? There's a lot of survey fatigue in our homelessness community as well when it comes to enumeration. So you have people like, yes, they are finding some new people. And also there are people who are just like, you know what, your $10 Tim Hortons gift card isn't enough for me to come and tell you all my trauma again and for nothing to happen. So we do see both of those things.
Just a quick point on the substance abuse stuff too, and I guess a lot of the public perception of people experiencing homelessness. There's a lot of this stuff goes on in other parts of the population as well as just behind closed doors, and not sort of at the mercy, perhaps that isn't the best phrase, but at the mercy of you know, well, needing to answer a question to get a $10 Tim's card or something like that, for instance. So,
Yep.
but now what are these surveys telling us in terms of the size of this issue?
Well, one thing we can see is that the number of people outside of the system has grown exponentially since COVID. During COVID, a lot of people moved into hotel shelters. All of a sudden, there was a lot of funding. We could just take over whole hotels and move people in. But they were very much a triaging, let's just try to keep everybody alive approach, honestly. And there wasn't a lot of housing focused conversations happening. And so what we saw was a lot of people, we call it chronic homelessness. So a lot of people aged into chronic homelessness in shelters during COVID. And then when the funding was gone, the hotels closed and most people just moved back into homelessness. Very few people moved into housing. So, and our shelter system just isn't big enough to capture all of that. So we have a lot more people sleeping outside. I don't remember the exact numbers, but a lot more people sleeping outside. And the percentage of people who are chronically homeless, of the people who identify as homeless, has also shifted. The ratio used to be, across the country, the ratio used to be more like 85-15 or 80-20. So like episodically homeless, I'm homeless right now, but I have been only for a little while and I probably won't be for very long, compared to I almost identify as a homeless person because I have been homeless for so long and maybe multiple times. We do see people kind of taking that on almost as an identity. I think to your point, Margaret, the othering means often people, even once they're rehoused, they still identify as homeless. We find that at Lucy's Place, actually. Redwood and Busby run a housing community, I guess, for folks who have experienced chronic homelessness. And people do still just identify as homeless. It becomes part of their identity. And we're seeing more and more and more of our homeless population, I guess, in Simcoe County, identifying in that way. They are chronically homeless. That means like the longer you're homeless, the more trauma you experience and the more supports you're going to need to recover from that experience. So it means like if you or I were homeless for a couple of weeks and somebody handed us keys, we could probably get back on track. But if we've been outside for years it's probably going to take a little bit more than somebody handing us keys. We're seeing people get handed keys, and then when it does happen, if the supports aren't in place, they're just back outside within the year. So what we really need, what the current, if we can learn something from the enumeration, it is that more people who are experiencing homelessness are chronically homeless, and they need supportive housing coming out of the shelter system, or ideally straight from a tent to a house. Like, you shouldn't have to come through the shelter system to get rehoused. So supportive housing is required, and it's expensive and resource intensive, but that is what we actually need. That's what, like, when they talk about Housing First in Finland and how that fixed everything, that's what they're talking about. And that's the kind that we don't have very much of here at all.
Right. Just to give a few, I mean, just for because you're saying about numbers, just so people understand. So I'm kind of like hesitant to give numbers, but I'm going to give some that just give us kind of like an idea. So if this is now 2022, so we're already 3 years out. This was the most recent one that they've got published that I can see. So 722 were counted experiencing homelessness, but it didn't break it down further. Like, this is just the infographic, but it didn't break it down further into chronic. Now, 50% of those were identified as staying within Barrie, and about 20% were single with children. And 61% stayed in emergency shelter, with the rest either unsheltered or unknown location, or provisionally accommodated, like within a vehicle or something. And then, interesting about COVID, 15% said that their housing loss was due to COVID. So just to give people some numbers that aren't as othering, but just to feel kind of like the population. But again, that's 3 years out. I'm assuming the population has grown since then too.
Yeah. And so there was a November 2024 enumeration as well. The report is not very public. You have to, now there is no infographic, and it is on, the only place that I have found it is as an attachment to the agenda of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, because they were presented this report. So I can send you the link if you like, but it's buried. It's not, I wouldn't even consider it public, to be honest. It's on the website, but it's as a link inside of an agenda to a closed meeting, not to a meeting. So in that one, they counted of unsheltered people in Simcoe County. In 2022, that number was 31. And in 2024, the number is 325. So just a lot more people outside. And that isn't captured in these dashboards, these up to the minute dashboards, where they're asking us to go get the data instead.
So that kind of gives us where the larger context. And I think it's also interesting talking to a mutual friend of ours, Susan. She was saying that, as you see social supports go down, whether that be, harder to get to housing, ODSP rates aren't matching, hospital, more things are being, charged to the private versus, covered. You start to see it's a correlative thing. Like it's like pulling from the people that were just precariously there with housing, and then just one thing after another, a car breaks down, a job loss, whatever, and then they're in that unfortunate situation. So back to Adam, where he was asking about the situation in Barrie. So Barrie just recently called a state of emergency regarding the houseless population, or those that are experiencing homelessness. And so can you give a little bit of detail on that?
Yes. So how to frame. So these are the opinions of Jennifer Van Gennep. These do not necessarily express any of the organizations I work for. I support the fact that we're all talking about homelessness all of a sudden and treating it as an emergency. My concern is with the framing, that it is because homelessness and lawlessness, the term lawlessness was used almost as much as the term homelessness in the press conference to announce this emergency, and they're being conflated. And I take issue with that. As Adam mentioned before, lots of people use substances. Lots of people have a problematic relationship with substances. Lots of people own crossbows, which for some reason became part of this conversation. But if it's in your tent, then you're on display. You're living your whole life. You're having your best moments and your worst moments in public all the time. And you have no privacy because you're just out in a tent on a sidewalk. And what do I want to say about that? I appreciate that there is attention to this situation. Housing is a human right. We should absolutely be working towards everyone having a place to call home. And we're actually all better off when all of us have a place to call home. I think that's the piece that I feel like is getting lost a little bit. I feel, and you can tell me what you think too, but I feel like we're getting more and more into individualism as a value, and I feel like that is actually part of the problem. Like when people say we need to get to the root cause of homelessness, and then they're like, yeah, substance use. It's like, actually, no. You keep digging, because the root causes are really more like a lack of an understanding of our interconnectedness, probably. Like, there's probably a layer below that too. That is a question that we have to keep digging at. And so what's happening, it's being framed, honestly, I don't even know what I struggle to even. So during that press conference with the mayor, where he was setting out his thing, he referenced the Bursey Park eviction, which happened last summer, almost exactly a year ago. And he said that of the 25 people that were living there, 12 of them accepted the help. And of those 12 that accepted the help, 9 of them are still living inside in long-term housing, and that was probably better than any other results that we've seen from anything else like this. So we at the Barrie Housing and Homelessness Justice Network have been fact-checking that, and that is actually not the case. He presented encampment eviction as an opportunity, and that is not actually how it should be framed. It's problematic. So one of the things that we're doing is holding the city accountable to that statement. So of the 25 people who lived there, 5 are housed today, and at least 4 of them only happened since February. 2 of them were just housed a few weeks ago in August. So, and it was not as a result of the opportunity presented to them as a result of the eviction. Looks like almost half of them were then evicted from the Mulcaster eviction last week. This is not the city coming in and doing people who are living in tents a favor. They just end up in a different spot. They're just picking up their tents and moving them to different spots, or they take a shelter space for a few nights, and maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't. Some folks are absolutely happy to take a shelter bed, 100%. There were people who were in tents because there were no shelter beds available. So when they opened up additional shelter beds, even though it's temporary, some folks definitely took them. But we also need to understand that some of those beds were offered in Collingwood or Angus or Wasaga Beach. And when we say their supports are here, we don't mean like their buddies. We mean maybe they have to do their methadone dispensing is here in Barrie, and they have to pick up their methadone every day in Barrie. And so if you're placed in a hotel in Collingwood, that doesn't work for you. So we have people who have come back to Barrie to live in a tent just so they can get their methadone, which is very counter to this message that everyone that lives in the tents is using drugs and trying to sell drugs and just wants to sit in their tent and use drugs. We see people who the only thing they have left in this world that they trust is their dog. And in that case, we have to find a way for your dog to be able to come with you. Maybe you have too much anxiety about being in the shelter because of something that's happened to you or something that you know has happened to someone else. And we need to be able to accommodate that. So there's this mentality of, well, they should just take what's being offered and be grateful. And that centers the person who's doing the offering, the ego, honestly, of the person who's doing the offering. It does not center the needs of the person who is being offered the help. And that is a shift that I think we're going to have to make if we're going to see any kind of long-term improvements.
I remember taking a course on ABCD, so asset-based community development, and it was run by a minister who teaches at the U of T in their theology program.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking about how there is this savior complex, which I'm sure we've all heard of, but he was describing how this one church was doing gift baskets for Christmas for kids.
Mm-hmm.
And the church was well-meaning, and they made up these baskets, and they got donations from dollar store stuff, and all of these sorts of things, and then they gave them to the families, and one of the families was like, my kids are too old for this stuff, like, this is Christmas and I don't have anything to really give them here. And the church was so inflamed by that they were just like, we're not doing it anymore. So he was called in to kind of mediate this situation. And he was like, imagine Christmas morning and someone wraps presents for your family. Just because I think sometimes it's easier for people to that have privilege to tie into that kind of experience.
Yeah.
Imagine you get a whole bunch of presents wrapped for your kids, for your family. They're not the right size. They're nothing that they like. They're broken. They're dirty. Imagine how grateful are you that this is the thing that you're giving your kids or giving your family, and it's nothing, your kids, there's a social pressure. So anyways, to go back to that whole idea of like, when you can start to frame it in something, in a habit that everybody's kind of used to, that Christmas idea, not everybody, but a large part of people that are privileged have that idea of Christmas and how important it is, and the social pressure for it. And you can feel that sense of like, oh, that would be terrible. Like, oh, I've got like baby clothes and my kid's 3 years old.
Yep.
You can feel that same kind of compassion in that situation, saying, imagine someone just said to you, this is the house you're going to live in, and it's, I don't know, whatever. There's lots of your dog can't come. You're going to not be able to get anywhere. It's, upstairs and you can't walk stairs, but you better like this.
Yep.
Right. And you better enjoy it, because you should be grateful because you don't have options. And so he talked the whole thing about how we assume when people run out of options, that is the time that we double down saying, well, since you don't have options, this is an option and you better be thankful for it. But really, it's like, you're taking someone who, kicking them when they're down, in a way of like, they have no options. And the fact that we're not empowering them to have options is like seen as almost this, it's too far, too soft, too whatever. And I'm like, I don't know, if I was out of options, I wouldn't want someone to just force things on me. But that seems to be that punitive sort of piece of like, well, if you've gotten yourself into this problem, not our fault, it's your fault. And as a punishment, we're going to help you, but on our terms, in our way. And if you don't like it, if you protest, then that's shown as a failure of you as an individual versus a failure of us of being responsive to the opportunity, right?
Yes, agreed. And that is one of the dangers of one of the messages that Mayor Nuttall has repeated is, if you want help, Barry will help you. But if you just want to sit in a tent with whatever, go somewhere else. And what isn't said there is help on my terms, right? And that, I think, is the most dangerous piece, because this is a nuanced conversation. I mean, I don't have pets, and so I honestly, at the beginning was kind of like, listen, if you're in a tent and I'm offering you an apartment and it means you have to give up your pets, like, I mean, maybe that's what it is. But this is where getting outside of your house and getting off the internet and going and meeting people makes a difference. Because I met a woman in a tent in Milligan's Pond, and she had 2 or 3 dogs and a ferret and a few things living with her in this tent. And I was like, what is going on here? But she had had her kids taken, and she had decided, like, she had lost everything, and she, in her mind, when she gets her kids back, if she doesn't also have the pets, they will hate her. And so she has prioritized in her life keeping these pets so that her kids won't be mad when they come home. And I don't know how you tell someone like that. We have to take my help on my terms.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That was a gut-wrenching story. Yeah. Adam, turning it over to you, since Jennifer and I need a little moment here.
Well, I've just been sort of poking around a little bit on. You briefly mentioned Finland at the start, housing first, and so also while you've been talking, I've been thinking about, well, this, and it's a little bit sort of anecdotally on my part, but I think my dog has a massive sigh
Your
slash
dog?
groan. That's and every
He has a
time he
car.
reorients his relaxation posture, he lets out this. Sorry, you what? You thought it was a fart?
No, I thought it was a
No,
car.
a
I thought
car.
it was
It was a car.
a van
No,
or something driving by.
no. He groans whenever he relaxes into something, like massively groans. It's ridiculous.
That's awesome.
Um, the anecdotal part is, it seems, and I don't think it really is, but just in my experience, it seems like homelessness vastly sort of ramped up from Premier Mike Harris onwards in Ontario, and which was really sort of slashing of social support, so the social welfare safety net. So I mean, which then also connects more currently, and I don't really think successive governments have really sort of restored much funding at all. But then thinking a little bit about how the numbers locally increased quite a bit post COVID, you lose, you're already sort of in a precarious position with employment that could be taken away quite easily or replaced by someone else quite easily. And you lose that, and what supports might be available from the government aren't enough to keep you in whatever shelter you had previously. So all of that, the I don't know, all of that sort of led me to looking up some metrics associated with what the cost might be of actually significantly addressing this issue. And it looks like it isn't actually costs, right? Like, if the investment is properly made, we'd actually be saving money as a society.
Yes. And you have to be willing to look beyond 4 years to see those savings. And we tend to think in election cycles with our policy ideas. If you're not going to see the benefit, if you're going to be paying for it, and then another government is going to be getting
Right.
the good things are going to happen while somebody else is in charge, we tend to not make those investments. But you are correct in that it actually costs more to maintain homelessness and manage homelessness than it would to end homelessness. Yeah.
So in Finland, they evaluations estimate that it annually per person saves the public purse between 10 and 15,000 euros a year
Per person?
per person. Yeah.
per person that's experiencing homelessness.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds right. And for people who don't know, what they do in Finland is they just give you an apartment and they send a person to like check up on you and offer you any supports that you need to stay housed. And I think it's called Housing First, and it's getting a bit of a bad rap right now because people are like, it doesn't work. When it doesn't work, it's not being implemented correctly. The principle of Housing First is actually really solid. And that's what they do in Finland. And I'm hearing there's just, I don't know what it is, but some people just really want to punish poor people. I can't personally wrap my head around it, but they're like, well, I think if we're going to do it, the supports have to be mandatory. Well, that's not how supports work. Like, that's not an evidence-based. Everybody, any study about accepting help shows it has to be voluntary for it to work, for it to stick, even for habits. Like, even if I want to start working out or something, it has to be me signing into, like, buying into it voluntarily for it to have any kind of lasting sticking power. So in a Housing First, in the implementation, it's required that the supports are offered, but it is not a requirement of keeping your housing that you take up the supports. Now, that doesn't mean, and that's because housing is a right, and so I can't take your housing because you're not doing what I want you to do. Now, that being said, as a supportive housing provider at Redwood, I can say, not that this is Redwood's philosophy, but I can say I can see from that perspective how sometimes you might have to say, some of what's going on here is not compatible with everyone that lives in this building being healthy and safe. So we may have to address some of what's going on here, but that's different from saying you have to accept the supports that I'm offering. Those are, I feel like those are two very different approaches. So the housing should be, and what we try to do at Redwood is, here's your housing, and there are supports if you want them, but you don't have to come down to coffee, or you don't have to come to dinner. You don't have to come to group or whatever to be able to keep your housing. It's just here if you want it.
When we were talking about punishing poor people, one of the things I remember learning in Sociology 101, which stuck with me ever since, because, coming from Halliburton, where we only had, like, it was a very, very low diversity. Let's just put it that way.
Yes.
A lot of poverty, to be honest,
Okay.
but low diversity. So when I went to university, I was like, oh my gosh, what are all these? Like, this is just crazy. Anyways, the one thing was talking about the out group and the in group, and that the out group is necessary to control the in group. And so, when you have a population such as the poor or homeless people, as much as it bothers the in group, it's also a necessary function to keep the in group in line, because you're like, look, if you don't do this, you're going to end up just like them.
Yeah.
And so the prof was kind of saying, be aware of who are in the out group, because it's always changing. Although poor always seems to seems to be there historically, but that it's not necessarily the right thing, but there's just an element of it that it's not justified, but it's functional for those that are in control of the in group, in order to manage behavior, to manage lawfulness. And so when you're saying, like, I don't know why we keep punishing people, why we don't solve this problem, and part of me thinks, I think if they solve this problem, they would have to figure out, if you removed poverty, this is, I'm not trying to be totally a terrible negative person, but if we totally eliminated poverty and houselessness, right, and we lived in this utopia from an in-group perspective, if you were really trying to keep the masses, what would be the thing that you would threaten them with? What would be the thing that they're like, man, if I don't follow the rules, if I don't keep my job, if I don't go to work, what's going to happen to me? Oh, I'm just going to sit at home and I'm going to have a house and I'm going to have food. Like, okay, well, so there's that little piece of it that I always think about. I'm like, well, yeah, that's probably a part of it. Not that people are doing it consciously, but it kind of comes with the script, I think, a little bit.
Yes. And I was just reading this morning that our scarcity is man-made. Like, we have chosen the scarcity that we have, and we could choose differently. So, especially when it comes to basics like food and clothes and housing, would it be so terrible if some people just had it and decided to not go to work? Like, would it be the worst thing ever?
No, it wouldn't be, but it would really mess with capitalism.
It would mess with capital. Okay, thank you. So it would mess with capitalism, but like,
Well,
I'm
no, but
ready
that
to mess with capitalism, honestly.
see that's actually, I mean, is that actually true though? Because those sort of financial uh, benefits of housing people, the housing first model seemed to actually support capitalism, right?
It's true. So, and I think a thing that is missing from this conversation, not just here, but most places, is that there is a difference between market and non-market housing. And when we're talking about housing first, and really anything Redwood builds or anything the county or the city would build, that's non-market housing, and it shouldn't impact. I mean, we tend to think that the way we do it is the only way, but you can go to other countries and 60% of the housing is public housing, and it's not. They build wealth in other ways, or they show their wealth in other ways, while most of the population is able to meet this basic human need. So you're right. I don't think universal income or housing as a human right hampers capitalism all that much, actually.
No, and in fact, I mean, I think most sort of level-headed economists recognize that capitalism works best when there are sort of robust guardrails, right? So sort of unfettered survival of the fitness. This sort of dumb conception of capitalism that we currently see sort of taken over certain areas of the world isn't actually very efficient at all.
Mm-hmm.
No, and I guess I was meaning more of that. That's the fear that politicians would have with it, right?
Yeah.
And you hear,
Yeah, I guess the problem is we should never sort of assume that politicians really know what the fuck they're talking about.
well, that there's a lot of people that I no longer assume that I know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
I live this longer every freaking day, and myself, I will admit there's things where I'm like, I don't freaking know.
No, and that's the key, is being humble. Sorry. Anyways.
Well, that's my middle name, really. But at the end of the day, there's all of this fear about what would happen if, and what would happen if, and that keeps it all just running status quo. Do you know what I mean? I'm wondering, Jennifer, if we could address maybe a few of the things that I would say the common person, the common narratives we hear about it. One of them is, this is a safety issue for the neighbors. This is something that's, and I'm not saying that they're wrong. I'm just trying to say, like, can we address some of these things? So one thing I hear a lot is about it's a safety issue for children, for women, which also tends to be rolled out when it's necessary. Think about the women, think about the children.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, the safety of women and children, the safety of neighborhoods, needles in parks, that sort of thing. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but like, how do we nuance that conversation a little bit more?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I would say, and this feels a little pat, but I think it is also useful just all the time to understand that there's a difference between actual safety and perception of safety. That's just a useful. Am I unsafe, or do I just feel unsafe? Am I unsafe, or am I just uncomfortable? Like, those aren't, and I'm not saying even necessarily just in homelessness when you're looking at someone who is experiencing homelessness. I just mean broadly, it's a useful check-in with ourselves. I will say, I think statistically speaking, like, this came up with panhandling too, that it wasn't safe for us if there were people who were panhandling. I'm pretty sure that statistically speaking, it's more dangerous to be a panhandler than to be in the vicinity of a panhandler, generally speaking. I would say, generally speaking, there's more of a safety risk to being unhoused than to being a housed person who sees an unhoused person. That would be an example, definitely, where you might feel uncomfortable because this is a new situation for you, but you are almost certainly not in danger. Just seeing an unhoused person is not, it might be dangerous to your conscience. It's not, you're not in physical danger just seeing a person who is unhoused. That being said, there is a level of survival that can kick in when you are in that situation that probably does to some. I'm outside of my area of expertise here, but I will say just my personal opinion. I would say it is possible that when you're in survival mode, you may do things that you wouldn't normally do. I think that is true. When there are no bathrooms and you are a human being and you have to go to the bathroom, you're going to have to go to the bathroom where you can. When no one will let you in to use their washrooms and there are not adequate public washrooms available, there is going to be feces outside. That's going to be how it is. And it's, who wants to see that? Nobody wants to see that. I also don't like it when people don't pick up after their dogs in my neighborhood. I find that annoying. So I think I'm rambling a little bit, but I think we do need to parse out which parts make us uncomfortable, which parts, but I will say that is also manufactured. Like, we could just have good access to public washrooms. And I am not a person who, when I see a homeless encampment, decides I need to ask for porta potties and garbage cleanup. I think that should be a given. But I am part of what we say at the Ontario Alliance to End Homelessness is we are the alliance to end homelessness, not make homelessness slightly less shitty. And we will ask for housing all day. We're not going to get distracted because turns out porta potties are really expensive. It turns out garbage pickup can be really expensive. So if you're going to ask the government to do all those things, you should probably just be asking for housing, honestly. But for safety, I would say, back to your safety question, it is more of a safety concern for the people who are actually experiencing it than the people who are viewing it. And there have been very unfortunate incidents of people being hurt by people who are experiencing homelessness.
I think so. I mean, I think both sides of those coins just really sort of underscore the need for proper housing. Like,
yes.
I don't think we need to, honestly, I don't feel like encampments or home living without a house is something that needs to be justified. I mean, I like it is a problem. I don't think most of the people experiencing that like it. There might be a few people here and there who just prefer to live outdoors, but I think by far probably most people would rather have a safe shelter,
Yes.
safe and reliable shelter, and that's I think the problem is really how we get there. Like that's where there have been decades of failure, policy failure from the government.
Mm-hmm.
And the government doesn't operate in a vacuum. To your point of sort of public sentiment and how sort of individualized and narrow-minded, I think a lot of people seem to view this, this issue in. that, government, I think, sort of picks up on that, and they recognize that also that, placing kind of these sort of semi-punitive measures on people in order for them to be able to access the services that they provide is is a reflection, I think, of a public sentiment that I wouldn't quite say likes to punish people in that out group, but likes to, like, that kind of discipline, that yeah. I mean, it is really, if you go to the sociological sort of body of work on disciplining a populace, really that is kind of, I think, where a lot of this stuff stems from. If you're going to be part of the outside group, there's going to be consequences for that, and we have the power to impose those consequences on you.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
And
but
then, sorry, go on.
but I think, and unfortunately, this comes from, like, a lot of our leaders profess to be people of faith, uh, including locally, and I think they're well known to frequent certain churches, and they seem to very conveniently ignore the golden rule, right? All the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, what kind of person are you when you only kind of use sort of the moral sort of guiding principles that you sort of profess to ascribe to when it's convenient? It's a pretty
Mm-hmm.
hollow person.
Well, I heard something a while ago that said you're only able to extend the amount of compassion to others that you have for yourself. So whenever I hear somebody who is really like, those people, let them, I'm like, oh, in my head, I'm like, oh, you're pretty hard on yourself. And I think, Adam, you raise a good point and picks up a little bit on what Jennifer was talking about when we're talking about othering. But when this is the point. This is not a old or not a new play. When whether it be colonialism or racism or any kind of prejudice, you start to have this feeling of they're not like you. It could be skin color, it could be religion, whatever it happens to be, class. They're not like you, and they're not like you, and they don't hold the same values as you, and they don't hold the same beliefs as you, and therefore they're dangerous. And so what you were saying, Jennifer, about this presumed idea of safety, coming across someone you've never met, somebody that's a part of that out group, whether it be based on sexuality, race, whatever, and you're like, all of a sudden you're like, oh gosh, you see people. I have an extended family member who has never really traveled much, is not very familiar with people that are non-white, and she visibly gets, she's older, she visibly gets stressed being in Toronto and clutches her purse like as if every person is going to yank it from her, right?
Mhm.
And I think it's important for the individuals listening to this podcast, all 5,000 of them, or 10 million of them, to
Okay.
be really thinking about when you get that feeling, maybe just think about it a little bit. Think about it. Is this actually something I have experienced with this person? Or is it something that I have been told, or there's been a narrative that's encouraging me to see this person as dangerous? And why am I seeing that person as dangerous? Do I have experience, or am I like peddling in things of my own bias and my own prejudice, right? It doesn't
Mhm.
fix everything. But I think so far now it's this, whether it be immigrants in the United States and that kind of sentiment, this playbook of let's make sure this outgroup gets punished, let's make sure everybody gets afraid of them, they dehumanize them, and then that is just a sliding scale down to, well, they don't deserve to have a house, they don't deserve to live, they don't deserve to have children, they don't deserve to hold jobs. Like, it just goes on and on and on, that you make them non-human enough, and then anything really goes, and we've seen it across the centuries. It's
Yeah.
not
I
new.
mean, it is a pretty deep seated impulse of ours, though, right? Like, to filter the world, a complex world, and to simplify, uh,
Mhm.
to identify threats or potential threats and things. That's a really important kind of framework, I think, that is pretty integral to who we are and how we move through the world. But I agree that I think it's important to if you can sort of check that and check your biases, question them a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
We're this actually went really fast. We're actually at 55 minutes here. Should we move on to the questions here and wrap up?
Yep. These are super hard, Jennifer.
Yeah. So,
I didn't study.
what advice would you give to a young person who wants to make a difference?
Yeah, just get involved, pay attention, and like I have twin 16-year-old girls, and one of them has a sign. She's like, you call a rally, I'm there. I've already got my sign made. Like, she's ready to go. She's paying attention, and she's having conversations. And but I would say also stay curious at the same time, because if I look back, I was so sure of my opinions all the time, and it's so easy to become really sure of your opinions, and sometimes they don't age well as you learn more and they evolve. So I think, like, speak up, be involved, and also stay curious and open to new perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
There's one of the sayings from philosopher Martin Heidegger was curiosity builds a way.
I like that.
How do you think about failure, and how do you respond when it happens?
Oh, well, I'm an Enneagram 3, so failure is like devastating for me. But I tend to be more understanding of it in other people than I am in myself, of course. Can you ask me the question again? Sorry, I got so like I was like failure and I got distracted.
The red alarm went up. Danger, danger.
You failed at answering the question. How do you think about failure, and how do you respond when it happens?
Oh, so obviously deep shame is my initial feeling, and then, but I guess as I get older, try to see it as this is cliche, but just try to see it as a thing that I'm like a learning, something that I've learned from it, and then not to do it again, I guess, like to see it as part of evolving my understanding and building wisdom, maybe I'm not old enough to use the word wisdom, but yeah. I do feel like I failed that question.
No, I don't think I think also part of that goes back to your first answer, though. Is it sort of prompts and provokes that curiosity as well, when you can't be certain about something. Yeah, and there's an aspect of humility to that.
Yep.
What's something you've been enjoying recently? So this could be a book or a podcast or a song, a musician, activity.
So I went to my first choir rehearsal last night.
Nice.
I know. My friend Angela, she lives in Calgary, and she was telling me all these things that she has started to distract herself, because she works from home too, and it's so easy to just work all the time. So she wanted something that was fun and to distract herself. So she's joined a book club, and she's taking Italian. And I was like, I don't really want to go to a language class, but I sang in a really good choir in university for 4 years, and I loved it. And maybe I could do that. So this weekend, I looked at the different choirs in Barrie, and last night I went to my first rehearsal, and it was awesome.
Which choir?
The King Edward Choir.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
My sister sings in a choir down in Toronto as well.
Oh, yeah. I don't know.
Mendelssohn. It's a different one.
Oh, is she the Elmer? No. The Mendelssohn? That is one of the choirs in Toronto. There are a lot of things, a lot of choirs in Toronto. But yeah, I like this one. They read I wanted one where people there can read music. and where we sing in parts and read music, but sing in English. It's a tricky thing. I want to sing Bach, but I want to sing it in English. So yeah.
Does it translate? It works out?
Yeah, it does. Well, it's in German. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah,
Okay.
it works out.
Cool.
Well, you got a plug for your choir then.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, when's that? So, sorry, you went to your first rehearsal, and have you got a performance coming up?
I can say me and my choir, we have a performance on December 6th. Yes.
I always wonder if part of the euphoria of singing in a choir comes from like the dizziness that you get from a lack of oxygen. Because I sang in a choir in high school. We had choir. We had to. May not have chosen to, but we had to.
Right.
Yeah.
You might be doing it wrong if you're dizzy the whole time.
Oh, okay.
I was gonna say.
Probably. Yeah.
That's
I kept
funny.
on having to pick myself off the floor.
Yes. No, but somebody was talking about that last night in dizziness. So I do. There's probably something to it. It's not something I experienced. I like doing thing. It's kind of like a group project, and where everybody's participating. So all facing out doing something together, I enjoy.
Yeah. And the harmony and the sonic, washing that you get is something else too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, congratulations for doing that for yourself.
Thank you.
Good luck in your choir. I guess that wraps us up. I guess, eh?
Yeah, it does. As you know, again, a reminder: if you like this, leave us a rating, like, subscribe. It's all good stuff. And yeah, check back. Most Tuesdays we're here. Almost most Tuesdays, Margaret's here, and yes, we will. Who's up? Who's on tap next week, Margaret? Do you remember?
Nope. I don't get paid enough to remember that.
No. September 23rd. Yeah, I'm not too sure. Actually, we don't have anything confirmed yet. All right. Well, it's a mystery guest next week.
It's been lovely, Jennifer. Thanks, Jen, for connecting with us.
Okay. We'll see you next time. Yeah. And thanks again, Jennifer. Bye.